Okay, so this is kind of the wrap-up lesson of both this module, Module 4, and also Module 3. I just kind of wanted to go over a few things that we've discussed, introduce a couple of new ideas, and emphasize a couple of ideas. So if you haven't realized it yet, what I'm really pointing to is that everything that you're experiencing that's stopping you from writing is a thought. That's it. There's no one with a gun to your head. There's no sort of outside pressure. It's all coming from within based on the power of thought and the power of our problem-solving brain, of course, which is formidable. And I want to point out, too, that the thoughts that block us do seem rational and reasonable. They make sense to us in the moment. And so one thing I want to point out is that our thinking is like the weather. It's always there, so there's always something going on, but it's also always changing. It's never stable. We never have a thought that stays with us forever. And I like to think about my thinking that way because it makes me take those negative thoughts or doubt a little less seriously, because I know that without any input from me, they're going to change, just like the weather. Or I think of it too as a river of energy sort of flowing through me, that there's always something new coming down the stream. As I say, it's not stable, it's always changing. So here's the thing, going back to our running metaphor. We can't stop the weather, but we can learn to run in the rain. We can learn to write despite what's going on between our ears. And people who run marathons, to go back to that analogy, have learned this long ago. Rare, I'm sure, is the day that they turn up for a marathon and the conditions are absolutely perfect. I mean, the odds that that's going to happen are pretty low. There's always going to be something that isn't ideal. It's raining, it's too hot, it's really windy, whatever it is. So what we as writers learn to do is just write despite what's going on in our brains. And as I've said before, the noise of that gets a little quieter, and we develop the ability to set it aside and not take it so seriously when we know that it's just rain, and that what's important is that we run anyway. And the writers who have learned to write consistently and to have those high word counts that we've heard about, that get thrown around a lot, is that this is what they've done. They've learned to notice the weather and write anyway. That's it. They're not smarter than you. They're not more creative than you. They don't have more hours in the day than you do. And that's a really important one to remember. We all have the same number of hours in the day. What they've put together or realized is that when they show up in their chair, there may be any number of things going on inside their head, and they've somehow, either similarly to what I've described in this course or in some other way, they've learned to write anyway, despite what's going on. And so what you may see now is that the two problems that we talked about, that we've been addressing in these last two modules, the bum and chair problem and the typing problem, both boil down to the same thing. It's all about our thinking. And when we can get our heads around that, and remember about our problem-solving brain and how it's trying to protect us, and allow ourselves to be a beginner and to blurt out what we need to, and not worry about quality when we're writing a first draft, but rather just thinking about quantity, those two problems are what's going to help us to boost our word count, whether we're starting from zero or whether we're a little bit more experienced and have written a few books. This is the essence of this course, and that's what's going to change things for you. And so what I'm pointing to again is that instead of battling our problem solving brain and thinking we have to be perfect right out of the gate, when you apply what you've learned here, you're going to create that little gap that I talked about between you and your thinking, and you'll be able to see it for what it is and then write when you want to. And so I just want to address another type of thought as well, or another type of thinking, which we may not recognize as such. So beliefs that we have about writing are really just thoughts that we've had a whole bunch of times, or we've had for a very long time. These can be conscious. We can maybe be conscious about the beliefs that we have about writing. I can't write unless I'm in a certain, let's say in my writing chair over on the other side of the room. If I have to be at my desk, that's not my creative place. Well, it may be that that's my preference, but if I hold that belief really tightly, it will get in my way. And I remember in sort of spring 2020, when we went into the COVID-19 pandemic, Joanna Penn at the Creative Penn talked about how she's always really transparent on the Creative Penn podcast. And so she was talking about how she was having a real struggle getting her writing done because she had a routine for when she writes fiction. She goes to a cafe and she wears noise canceling headphones and buys a cup of coffee and has a little writing desk set up that's portable, and that sort of in her mind became her creative place. And so when that was taken away and the cafes were closed and the UK was on lockdown, she wasn't able to do that. And so it took her a little while, but I remember her saying on a later podcast that she then realized she just needed to shift her mindset a little bit and decide that some other area in her house or her office or whatever could also be a creative space. So that's the kind of thing I'm talking about when I'm talking about beliefs, that we think things maybe are written in stone, but really they're thinking, and they're changeable, and they move and change. And when we're able to observe them, that does make them a little more malleable. So I just wanted to talk about that because we can get in our own way with these kind of beliefs as well, which seem truer than other thoughts. So now we're going to talk about writing hacks. This module 5, is all about how we can have tools and tips and tricks that are going to support us to do the things that I've talked about in these past few modules. So let's jump in there and I'll meet you over there in module 5.